Thank you everybody for joining us today for our industry update. As always, please be sure to mute your line and use the chat feature for any questions you may have. We will be recording this and posting it up on our website and sending it out for you to review at a later time too. And with that, I will turn this over to you, John.
I hope that everyone had as nice a Thanksgiving as possible under these unusual circumstances this year, and that maybe you got a chance to be with at least part of your family. As a reminder, today's webinar is designed for the benefit of restaurants, hotels, and our travel and tourism partners, as well as other friends of PRLA. It is off the record. It's not designed for our friends at the press. We're always happy to entertain any and all press inquiries, but not at this time. So if you're with the press, please disconnect. And with that, I'm happy to introduce your host today, Melissa Bova.
Host today. I feel like I'm the host every day. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's update. Knock on wood, there isn't a lot to talk about. So let's hope that it stays that way, because I think we can all agree at this point, no news is good news all around. Let's jump to federal, because that's really where things are happening, which is also a nice change, because the last month I've basically been saying on a hope and a prayer, we hope something will happen. And it actually looks like something is happening. I've also said it looks like something is happening about 10 times as it pertains to federal packages, but I'm optimistic about this one, more optimistic than I have in the past. So we have been saying all along, and with the Pennsylvania legislature being out of session and they can't do anything for us, not that they did in the budget anyway, we need financial assistance, that none of you are going to get through the winter unless there is more financial assistance. And finally, it does seem that that is gaining some traction within Congress right now. We do have a bipartisan group of members in the House and the Senate, which is a nice change, because usually it's always one or the other, that are beginning to coalesce around a $908 billion stimulus package. This is markedly less than what the House passed when they passed their legislation, which is a $3 trillion package. But as I had mentioned last week to all of you, we were not counting on a huge package. We needed just something to kind of get us through the winter till we have a new president, till we have a new Congress, and then we can reassess from there. So one of the key, probably the most important provision that's in this proposed package is a second round of PPP. That's what you need. You all need cash. You all need capital at this point in time. So it does include a second round of PPP, specifically mentioning the restaurant industry. Now, there is a clause to this. For the second round of PPP, you have to prove that you've lost 35% in sales this year compared to last year. And I would, if there's somebody in the restaurant industry that has not lost 35%, whatever your trick is to have not done that, please share it with everybody on the call. But it does include an additional, like I said, $288 billion for a second drawdown on PPP. So that's the most important part of it. Another part of it, as it relates to PPP, for all of my financial nerds on the call today, there's always, there's a view that have like flashbacks to 15-year depreciation. Whenever a bill's passed in Congress, there's always something that they mess up. And part of this, which was partially in the bill and then partially the Treasury Department, essentially said that if you use any of your PPP money on something that would normally be tax deductible, it is no longer tax deductible, because they're saying you use the government money to do it, therefore it's not deductible anymore. That is a huge issue for all of you that have used it for those purposes. And part of this package does allow for that tax deductibility. So you'll still be able to deduct what you normally would, even if you used your PPP funds to pay for it. And that's really important to have that done before the end of the year, because in 2021, hopefully a year of wonder and COVID vaccines, you'll be paying taxes and you'll need to be able to deduct those expenses that you spent the PPP on. Third, if the state can't do it, the Fed should. It does include that liability protection that we have been asking for. So that's kind of the third key part of the package that's being discussed right now. There's a ton of other things in there, healthcare provider relief, vaccine development, all of that. The U.S. Postal Service is getting some funding, opioid funding, and then it also does include, on top of the $288 billion for PPP, $160 billion will go to state, local, and tribal governments, which are those federal funds that our state was so quick to spend on balancing the budget a few weeks ago. So that's the package as it is right now. I do have a call to action on here. We will be getting a call to action alert from our national associations, specifically the National Restaurant Association is compiling all of that data that you gave them last week when we asked you to complete that survey to really drive home the fact that we need this assistance. This package does not include the $120 billion Restaurants Act. That does not mean that Restaurants Act isn't going to happen. It just means that they really tried to figure out what can they get done quickly, what can they do to infuse cash to you, and how can they do it in a way that the Republican-controlled Senate will actually pass it. So I'm more hopeful than I have been in the past because of the legislators that are behind the legislation. When we ask you to make calls, we need you to do that. If we do not get this bill done, if this bill doesn't pass, this stimulus package, we are basically out of luck until February. And most of you are not going to make it until February without that second drawdown of the PPP. So please stay alert to the daily updates in terms of how you can outreach and urge support for this package. So hopefully that does get done within the next couple of weeks, and stay tuned for that because that's really what we're focusing on right now. Also, I have on here vaccines. That is the news article of the week. We are seeing there's 2 vaccines that the FDA is going to be potentially approving beginning next week. They're reviewing the first one on December 10th, the second one on December 17th. And if they are approved, then vaccines can start to be distributed. With that being said, and if you've read the news articles, this is not new information. The focus is going to be on healthcare workers, high-risk people, going to senior citizens. So for the general population, if the vaccines, when they get to that point, we're probably not going to see vaccinations until spring, early summer of next year, which means that COVID is going to be around really until spring, early summer of next year. But we do have vaccines. Like I said, 2 are in the hopper, and there should be more coming over the next few months. And I think we've said this back in March, April, and especially over the summer, we said this isn't going to be over until there's a vaccine, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There are vaccines, they are getting approved. And once they're out there and we can get rid of COVID, we can go back to normal. So that's kind of where we are at the federal level. State. So what's happening at the state? Our governor has been busy. I mentioned some of these items last week. House Bill 1617, which was a PRLA priority bill pre-COVID, but we still checked the box and it got it across the finish line. House Bill 1617 was signed by the governor last week. As I mentioned, that is that old, if you have one of those old H licenses that were established before 1949 and you got the room exemption, you would be able to convert that to a restaurant license for a fee of $30,000. And then if you sell it within 5 years, there's a fee attached to that, but it really gives value to those of you that have those old licenses that you've been operating as a restaurant, but have had no value as a restaurant. And there's about 300 of them across the state. That bill also includes some other not as exciting, but maybe exciting provisions. One is it allows fermented fruit beverages to be pulled out of the LCB and sold in beer distributors. So those are your 1.5 to 8.5% fruit beverages that are considered malt and brewed beverages now. So those will be able to be sold in beer distributors. Also, it contains some clarifications for those of you that have gone through the black hole of trying to invest in a property or buy a property and the owner is the holder of a manufacturing license and you haven't been able to. Some of those tchotchke clarifications were in House Bill 1617 as well. So that has been signed. It will take effect January 24th of 2021. So nothing to do on that front yet, but it will take effect January 24th. On the land that we're used to of vetoes, the governor did veto that liability protection bill we asked you all to urge support for with the legislature when they were passing the budget. He did veto that bill. Don't read the veto message because it absolutely doesn't make any sense and it has nothing to do with liability. But a lot of the veto messages, as we've experienced, don't make a lot of sense. But he did veto it. There is not a chance for a veto override on that. It barely passed with majority support when it went through the legislature. So it's an inherently different bill than our House Bill 2513, because our bill did pass with what we like to call a veto-proof majority, even though they didn't stick with it. House Bill 1737 is not expected to get a veto override, and they're not even going to put it up for a veto override, which is why that $908 billion stimulus package that contains liability protection is going to be really important in terms of you operating and not having that cloud over your head in terms of liability of being sued because somebody claims they might have gotten COVID at your business. So what's next? The legislature worked really hard for the last year and 10 months, and they're now in recess. And actually, as of yesterday, the session officially came to an end. So in Pennsylvania, we have a 2-year legislative session. Everybody has 2 years to file bills and get them across the finish line. And then poof, they're dead and we start from scratch. So we are starting from scratch in the new session that will officially begin yesterday, but they will not return to session until the middle of January. So all of those new elected officials, all of those people who won their election began their session yesterday. That's why when I talk about legislative priorities, our focus is so much at the federal level, because there's not going to be anything happening at the state level until the middle of January. And then even then, people will just be filing bills from the beginning again. So that's really why the focus is on that federal level. We do not expect any session to be scheduled between now and really the middle of January, at least on the state level. So statewide, you see how small? There's only 2 bullet points here because we haven't had any bad news this week, which is a really nice change for all of us. Case counts are still terrible, higher than they were. Philadelphia, for whatever reason, is actually a little less than they were, but still very high. But it's increasing. Thank you, Macy. Macy's very upset about the case counts. So, They do expect a surge to come from Thanksgiving because, of course, the order was that you should not be with anybody that's not in your immediate household. I think some of us, I would have loved to have shared a turkey leg with Macy, but I did spend Thanksgiving with my parents. So a lot of us, while we did not have those large gatherings, were gathering, and they do expect an increase on that. So that's something that's kind of keeping us up at night right now. Will anything else happen? That's really the question of the day. And I've gotten every week, the same number of people email me or text me or call me and ask this question: is there going to be a new round of mitigation? I don't see it right now. The cases aren't coming from restaurants. That has been proven. And the fact that they're worried about Thanksgiving especially proves it. Macy's very excited about this slide. But will anything happen? I can tell you, I mean, we saw this. We got the shutdown at St. Patrick's Day. They shut us down at 5 p.m. the night before Thanksgiving. And a few months ago, one of my priorities was to try and make sure that you all could have a champagne toast on New Year's Eve. Now, the priority is to not have a curfew on New Year's Eve. But that's probably the one thing I'm most thinking could happen at this point, is a New Year's Eve curfew, which again makes 0 sense. But that's really the only thing that I'm thinking about now. Of course, if other states do shutdowns and go further, that's something we need to keep an eye on. But really the data is showing, and everybody is saying, that the cases are coming from people gathering in their homes. It's a personal responsibility issue, not restaurants or events, responsibly held events issue. So that's kind of my prediction on that front. And of course, if we hear anything, we will definitely let you know. Allegheny County has their weekly press conference at 4 p.m. They have been really consistent in aligning with the state So we do expect that to continue. Delaware County does have more mitigation than other counties, but not as bad as Philadelphia. And as we see maybe some large increases, we might see some individual counties ask for more restrictions, but we don't expect any statewide restrictions, at least not today at 11:15 a.m. Wow, I'm going fast through these slides today. Next slide. So for Philadelphia, I mentioned this already, case counts are slightly lower than they were a week ago and even lower than 2 weeks ago. So that seems to be going in the right direction. Again, the cases were coming from people gathering, but they still shut down restaurants. Philadelphia did make an announcement yesterday, probably not the most exciting of announcements because we were working for something that was a little bit more all-encompassing, but they did make some announcements in terms of changes for restaurants. So specifically, for those of you in Philadelphia for UNO, a PRLA was advocating that you shouldn't have to pay UNO considering your indoor dining has been shut down. I don't even know if this is meeting in the middle, said you don't have to pay UNO for the space that's not being used. So your dining room, you don't have to pay UNO, use and occupancy tax, but your kitchen and anywhere else where you have people, you would still have to be remitting your monthly UNO on that. Also, for BERT, which is your remittance of your taxes ahead of time, if you've over remitted because it was based on last year and your revenue is less, you can apply for a refund. That will only take 6 to 8 weeks to come back to you. And then for those of you that are getting your trash collected by the city, that comes with a $500 fee. They are waiving that. It's currently due by the end of the year. They're going to allow it to be due by June 30th of 2021. So those are some steps that Philadelphia has taken to try and help businesses. We're pushing for more. But again, all across the state, this is what we're hearing is that they need the feds to do something. They can't provide more relief for the industry unless the feds step up and do something on their end. And that's, we're hearing that all across the state. Pittsburgh, where are my Pittsburgh friends that have more than 50 employees? Because your life is about to get a lot harder. Pittsburgh City Council, as early might have been today, it looks like next week, is going to be passing emergency paid leave. So essentially, what you have been able to offer your employees under Families First, the Coronavirus Response Act, that one that you were reimbursed for, Pittsburgh is looking to extend that until the end of the emergency declaration. And currently Families First sunsets on December 31st. So after December 31st in Pittsburgh, if you have more than 50 employees and an employee has COVID, needs to quarantine from COVID, needs to care for a child because their school is closed, or care for a family member who has COVID, you will need to pay out of pocket up to 112 hours of paid leave. So essentially everything that was in Families First, the city of Pittsburgh is going to be requiring you to pay out of pocket to your employees. So if you care about this, which I know there is a Western chapter meeting and I don't think it got as much traction as I would have liked it to, sorry, I was just reading the bill. You really do need to start reaching out to Pittsburgh City Council. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to kill this bill. We worked on a similar bill in Philadelphia and made a lot of really great changes. I'm working, and PRLA is part of a large coalition out in Pittsburgh that's working on making changes to this bill to make it more manageable, but it is still going to be an additional out-of-pocket expense for those of you with 50 or more employees at a time that you cannot afford any additional out-of-pocket expenses. So the hope is that maybe we can extend Families First. Again, the feds could extend Families First beyond December 31st, because if that's extended, then you're covered under that. If not, this is going to be leave that you will have to provide until the emergency declaration in Pittsburgh is ended. And if you are in Pittsburgh, once we get more details of where the legislation stands, we will be doing a call to action and providing you contact information. Right now, we're just trying to figure out the state of play and take it from there. And I think I'll turn it over for webinars and some other things. And then I'm going to go through all of that. We have like a motley amount of questions today, like all over the place. So I'll read through some of those while you guys handle the webinars.
Great. Well, we will be back next week. It's actually December 9th that Melissa will be doing our update next week. So we will make sure that that's on our website appropriately. Gannon University, which is the location where the Small Business Development Center is, they're doing a great free webinar on the 8th about employee attraction and retention. It's they're dealing with proactive approaches for HR issues to help you keep your employees and help them grow with your organization. So please take a look at that. And the NRA will be doing a webinar about new technologies that are helping restaurants become more voice enabled. So new trends and technologies that are coming out of COVID. So take a look at that. As always, they both are recorded. So you'll be able to get a recording of that. Carry Out PA, please make sure that you're out on this for this free resource for your restaurant to update for your takeout, your curbside deliveries, your holiday meals that you may be offering. So make sure that you're up to date on that. We are directing and doing some campaigns to get people to go to the Carry Out PA to find out more about what's available. And HARP, yesterday was a great day for Giving Tuesday. We brought in about $3,500 through our outreach. We do have a toolkit that's available for restaurants to help spread the word with a QR code that you could put out onto your website or to reach out to your customers. We are looking to try to open up the application next week. We had some generous donations come in from Tito's and from Cheers PA. So we are looking to get some money into the frontline hospitality workers' hands again. But your help is needed to spread the word to your customers, to let them know that this is a great way that they could be helping your industry too. And with that, just always remember we have training solutions, food safety classes. Make sure you get into the classes as soon as possible because they are at minimal with the restrictions that they don't have a lot of space. And if you have any time and would like to provide any snippets of virtual experiences for our schools, that would be wonderful because they are going remote at this point. A lot of them with the case counts going up, the schools are taking the kids back out of the classroom. So this remote experiences and the virtual experiences are more important than ever at this point. And with that, I don't know if you're ready, Melissa?
Sure. I think this is a comment from Bob. The longer this goes, the less month back payroll that will be reported for the next PPP as well. Just laid off and cut hours today. Yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, we've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. The governor has not reduced restaurant capacity below 50% as long as you self-certify, but how many of you are filling up 50%? So they're basically, it's like death from a thousand cuts. They're telling people don't leave your home, don't go to restaurants. Well, not restaurants, just don't go out, stay at home advisory. And you guys are empty because of it. So they're almost reducing our capacity or ability to operate just in a different way than a full shutdown. Can you apply for PPP if you already got it in the spring and don't have loan forgiveness yet? Yes, because it's taking forever for anybody to get loan forgiveness. And two, you technically have until the end of the year to apply for forgiveness. So you will be able to draw down a second time. Now, as I said, we only know concepts of what's in this bill right now. We will get some more clarifications. I know we're looking and hoping that there will be some funding for our 501c6s as part of this package. But you will be able to apply for the PPP if you haven't gotten forgiveness yet. Okay, can you talk about requirements around safekeeping of liquor licenses within private event venues in Philadelphia? Well, safekeeping is not just a Philadelphia issue. I know it is because a lot of people have been putting and thinking about putting their licenses in safekeeping. But under the law, if you are not using your license for 15 days, you have to put it in safekeeping. So we do have a number of, and before this newest order from the LCB, I think I talked about this last week, but let me go through it again. during COVID, you were not required to put your license in safekeeping if you shut your doors. It was just the LCB was like, don't worry about it. We don't have the time or resources to deal with it anyway. So up until their most recent advisory, you did not have to put your license in safekeeping if you were not operating. Since then, the LCB kind of realized we don't actually know who's operating and who isn't operating because we're not requiring them to put their license in safekeeping. So they are now saying again, if you do not use your license for 15 days, it needs to be put into safekeeping. There's two parts of that we're working on right now. So for many of you in Philadelphia, you're looking to just kind of hunker down and get through the winter and maybe close your doors until spring. If your license is in safekeeping for less than 90 days, it's very straightforward to pull it out of safekeeping. You literally just have to tell the LCB, I want to pull my license out of safekeeping. If it's in for longer than 90 days, it's a more vigorous, stupid process, in short. And that's because historically, anybody who would put their license in safekeeping, it's probably because they were doing a major renovation or making major changes. And therefore, the logic is that they need to be re-inspected before they can open again. And that requires a lot of paperwork and a lot of extra work on the end of all of you. My hope is, and I'm working with the LCB to extend that 90 days to maybe 120 or 150 to allow those of you that are putting your license in safekeeping for COVID reasons to not have the issues of pulling it out again. But safekeeping applies to all licenses. It's not just a restaurant license issue. I know we hear it from a lot of restaurants, but it's any license that you're authorized to sell alcohol. If you do not use it for 15 days, it does need to go in safekeeping.
Melissa, Keith Clark, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've had some nits on that issue
Okay.
through council call. For example, I want to close down my premises, but I still want to sell takeout wine because I have the permit to do that.
Nope.
That means you can't put your license in safekeeping, in our opinion, at that point.
I agree.
You're still using the license. The same way as takeout, same way as delivery. As long as you're using that license for any kind of sales of alcohol, you have to keep it active.
Thanks, Keith.
Mhm.
Okay, so next question. Can you provide a status of federal lawsuit victory that Wolf appealed and 50% event occupancy was stopped by stay from appeals court? So it has been appealed to the Third Circuit, I think, and they have not heard the case yet. Now, this is the problem with that case now. And this is why when we got that ruling from Judge Stickman, it kind of became a moot point because the ruling was very specific to the occupancy requirements that were in place at the time. So he ruled you can't do the 25-250. And then the governor said, okay, we're not going to do 25-250 anymore. We're going to do 25% or 10%. So he also ruled you cannot shut down businesses unilaterally. Well, now businesses are not shut down unilaterally. And he also said you can't issue a stay-at-home order. So now it can be appealed, but the appeal is on rules that were in place that are no longer in place. So essentially, while the governor says 10%, that another lawsuit would have to be filed that says 10% indoor occupancy is shenanigans and it's unfair. So currently it is on appeal, and we do expect them to hear the case, but it's not on mandates and requirements that are in place now. It's only on those that weren't before. So we might get a ruling saying that those are no longer legal, but none of those are in play any longer. So it's there, but it's not really going to change the rules and regulations that are in place on all of us right now. With the recent mandate on size limits, how does this affect hotel pools? I have to look back, Brett. I mean, I think you were at hotel pools are the same as the fitness center, so you'd be at 50%. I'm going to go with that. I had to think about it because I was in restaurant world. Yeah, so I would say a hotel pool could be categorized into anything that would be operating at 50%. So your occupancy for your pool should be at 50%. So it does not change, does not say 10%. Now, if you are having a pool party, if somebody's having a birthday party at the pool and you're providing food and beverage, now you've just triggered the event guidance of 10%. Brett, you really are making me think today. So yes, that's my answer. Will you please explain, clarify the requirement for a transaction scan device to sell to-go cocktails? Does the scanner app need to verify age, keep a record of the scanned ID, etc.? So this is from Michelle. The language is straightforward. It does not say, it says you need a transaction scan device, period. It doesn't say that it has to, I mean, it has to fit the definition of a transaction scan device, but it does not require storage of the information. Well, for a certain extent it does, because they have to by nature, but there is no specific requirements or company that you need to use for it. You just need to obtain a transaction scan device. And I know we have on our website some options for you to use. So as long as you're not just, taking a scanner on your phone that's not actually a transaction scanner and saying that checks the box, you're going to check the box in terms of that. Do you have a comment about the bar in Lansdale that refused to adhere to the day before Thanksgiving restrictions? They were open until 2 a.m. and the bar was packed and none of the staff wore masks. Down here in Monco, lots of places are doing as they please, and it is a smack in the face to us who have been following the mandates. Do I have a comment? I think they're stupid. Is that a valid comment? I mean, anybody who's not following the rules is putting the rest of you at risk, and we know that. And we know that the rules and regulations are shenanigans, and we know it's frustrating. And I know John unmuted, so he's going to be a lot more politically correct than I am. But I mean, you should be turning these people in. The police, local police can enforce it. LCE can enforce it. If they're not following the rules, you should be turning them in. And if you won't do it, give me their name and I will. I have no problem with that. Go ahead, John.
We have actual history on this. If you remember, the reason why, if there was one thing that triggered the 25% mandate on July 15th, it was the action of a handful of bars in Pittsburgh who got a lot of press for doing the exact same thing you're describing. So consequently, and there was nothing else that the secretary or the governor could cite except that the Pittsburgh cases that to justify their 25%, which ultimately was not justifiable. But so that's why it's so important that we keep saying 95%, and I think it's higher than that, of the restaurants are following the rules. Restaurants are not the problem. But if we get a lot of people that become the problem, then it's going to affect everyone, like Melissa said. So that's why it's important to try to do the right thing and to follow the rules. We obviously can't condone, as an association, not obeying the law, and particularly when it affects everyone else, like Melissa says.
Keith, this is not new issue. There are certain collections of licenses in different parts of the state, and those of you who are probably know where I'm going to be talking about, where there has been in the past an increase in reports by one licensee against another, not on an anonymous basis, which started a whole run of cross complaints on different things. So I absolutely agree with Melissa and John that we can't tolerate it, but I ask you to be cautious that you may not get what you asked for by starting to do that on a non-anonymous basis.
Thanks, Keith. It looks like we're getting into Pittsburgh questions. So Melissa, will that emergency paid leave apply if you only have 35 local employees, but over 500 in the company? Our other locations are all in Ohio, and then another 50 plus. So it is if you have 50 or more employees who are working within the city of Pittsburgh. So if you only have 35 employees working within the city limits of Pittsburgh, it does not impact you. But if you have 50 or more employees, after the effective date of this ordinance. So right now, obviously, a lot of your employees are probably laid off because with the increase in cases, you're probably laying some people off. So let's say you have 35 employees right now, and then in 2 months, case numbers are down, people are starting to go out again, you bring back 15 employees, you're now at 50 and this law just triggered for you. So anytime after this takes effect, If you have more than 50 employees working within the city of Pittsburgh, this would trigger. And yes, Pittsburgh is not, no, Brittany, welcome to the black hole of the western part of the state. So Pittsburgh City is separate from Allegheny County. So this bill is Pittsburgh City, not Allegheny County. So if you are in Monroeville, this does not apply to you. It's only if you are within the city limits of Pittsburgh, if Pittsburgh City Council, essentially, if you have to offer paid sick leave because you are located in the city of Pittsburgh, you have to offer this leave as well. If you don't have to offer paid sick leave under the law, that means you're in Allegheny County and this doesn't apply to you. City only, not county for the Families First extension. Well, Families First is universal. That's the whole country has Family First protection until December 31st of this year. That's why this bill is such a concern, because if Family First doesn't get extended, you will be required to pay out of pocket if you're located in the city of Pittsburgh with 50 or more employees. Yes, Roy, there is PPP in the latest stimulus, about $288 billion for a second round of PPP. We were closed for 4 months in 2019 for a major renovation. Is there any exception for the PPP 35% loss requirement? Again, Charles, we have to read the bill. Historically, what we've seen is that if you do not have revenue because you were closed, you can use the first part of 2020. So January through March of 2020, you could use that quarter to apply for the revenue loss. That's historically how it's been. I don't expect this to be any different. And Ben put a link to HARP in here. I do want to do a shout out to the PRLA staff. Hope and Heidi especially have just been going gangbusters on HARP and making it such a focus. And any support you can offer, especially to those hospitality workers in Philadelphia that are out of work again for no fault of their own, we'd really appreciate your support so Hope can start cutting those checks again to those workers. And then Wendy has said she can help do it. That was for Hope. I'm assuming Hope read that. Are there any stats comparing PA restaurant closures to other states, especially surrounding states like Delaware, 1 mile down the road? Sean, I drove by your restaurant yesterday. That are enjoying full bar seating. Delaware restaurants near me are thriving because of what PA governor has done to push customers out of state. John, do you want to handle this? I know we have stats
Sure.
that we've been more impacted, but I don't know about closures.
Be happy to. The difficulty with measuring closures, Sean, is when we do the surveys, which we just had another one that was completed yesterday. Results will be out the end of this week. We did with our partners at the National Restaurant Association, is that restaurants that are closed don't respond to surveys. So the accurate data on closed restaurants is difficult. I will say that we've gotten tremendous traction from the survey data where we asked the question, how likely is it that you'll be open in 6 months if business conditions don't change? In Pennsylvania, and you've probably heard me say this because I've said it hundreds of times in news interviews, 63% of restaurants responded they would be closed within 6 months. Nationwide, 38% responded that way. This was the September survey. Your point about using Delaware is really smart and something, frankly, we hadn't thought about. We have a really close relationship with all of the state restaurant associations. And while we get Pennsylvania numbers and national numbers from the survey, I will get the Delaware numbers from the survey that come out later this week so that we can make that comparison in our press interviews as well. I think it's a really good point. Their numbers are probably even better than the nationwide numbers. So we'll do that and appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you.
The next question, John, I think the answer is no, but I was not on the NRA call yesterday because I tried to take a half-day vacation, which failed. Is there historically on the second round of PPP, there is a limit on number of locations. Is there a limit on number of locations in the second round? I didn't see that in the NRA debrief.
There was not a discussion about that yesterday, and I did ask them a couple other questions this morning about the PPP. The legislative language has not been written for this $908 billion bill that Melissa's talking about, so they don't know at this point in time. Obviously, what we do when we work with them through the National Restaurant Association is to make it broad so that it could be as inclusive as possible and not exclusive, but I can't tell you right now.
And then the last one is a comment from Ronald about that Lansdale restaurant. I actually do know what restaurant you're talking about, Ronald, so I can do some due diligence on that as well. They did post it on Facebook because I saw it on Facebook. So I can do some due diligence on that because they were very obvious about it. And I can see if LCE stopped by. I can't imagine that LCE didn't stop by considering they were on the news about it. The survey data you quoted, when did that survey close?
It was done in September, Allison, and we got right at the end of August. So it's really a September survey. And there was actually 2 questions about closure. One was if business conditions don't improve, and 63% said that they would close. And then they also asked if they didn't get aid, and 66% said they would close if they didn't get aid. So it's very close on both of those. The other interesting stat from that you've probably heard me talk about is that they were also asked if they'd laid off employees in July and August when most of the country was still in a rebound in the restaurant industry. Nationwide, 19% of the restaurants laid off employees in July and August. In Pennsylvania, 42% did. So it really speaks to the more draconian approach that had been taken by the governor and the secretary, at least prior to recently, where Melissa points out that it appears that they're doing everything they can not to add additional long-standing mitigation for restaurants, and we'll continue to beat the drum on that.
Okay, I think we're Michael. Thank you. And thank you, Michael and Sue, for the thank you every week. Okay, are you expecting the stop of liquor sales in restaurants by a certain time for New Year's Eve, like Thanksgiving Eve? They might not. Maybe they'll surprise me. Like I said, I didn't predict 5 p.m. for the day before Thanksgiving. So, I mean, we knew that there was a curfew, and I think we were all thinking they'd at least allow for dinner service. I would hope that in this scenario, they would allow for dinner service. But I honestly don't know. And I also don't know if they can make a valid argument that they should shut down our operations, which is going to drive people to gather in their homes. So I don't know if they can make that argument again. I'm just saying historically, from what we've seen them do, that's probably the one that I'm worried about, but that's not based on them telling me anything. That's just me looking at the past and worrying about the future.
We've got a lot of traction about this idea, Ross, that by closing down events and restaurants to safely serve people with all of the requirements, face masking, social distancing, sanitation requirements, ServSafe certified managers, RAMP certified bartenders, that when they push those things into homes, it actually expands the spread of the virus. We've got a lot of traction on that with the press, including national press. And we're going to continue that. And we're also working about, and I don't know whether we'll be able to pull it together, but we're working on a campaign now to promote the idea that New Year's Eve should be held out rather than in, because we have all the safe procedures. For example, a picture of what New Year's Eve parties look like in a home versus what they look like in a restaurant.
I think we are nearing the end.
It looks that way. I hope one more.
Maggie, I'm glad you asked this question because I did ask. Her question was, did anyone, media or otherwise, ask the governor's office why they chose to keep their wine and spirit stores open after 5 p.m. last Wednesday when liquor service was closed off elsewhere? I asked the LCB that. They will vouch that I did. And they essentially said, well, that's considered takeout and you're allowed to do takeout, and so are we. But Maggie, within an hour of that announcement, I asked that question and said that they should probably shut down too. They didn't take kindly to that, but I did ask. Yes, it was a very lame answer, and I might have told them, I might have used lame. I might have, but you all have known me now for over 8 months, some of you longer. I'm nothing if not honest when I tell people my opinions of their responses. And let's hope that next week we are celebrating a federal package that gets you PPP. That, like I said, I think that's our top #1 priority. If it includes liability protection, that's just going to check a lot of boxes to get you all through the winter. So that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah, I do, Bob. I do tend to think the governor must be joking, but he's not. And he thinks he's doing the right thing, even if it's the wrong thing. I think we are officially at the end. Let's do this again next week.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks Melissa and John, and everybody stay safe and have a good rest of the week.